Welcome everyone to the first ever digital fireside at MarketingKind. The idea behind the digital fireside stream of activity that we're opening up is to create a sort of retreat-like space that we can step into outside of the day job and even outside of our usual activities and discussions at MarketingKind, to take the time to reflect on how we can become more purposeful, more impactful marketers, maybe even happier marketers, and to support each other in these reflections. The theme of today's digital fireside is renewal, and that's partly, of course, because it's our first one, partly because it's that time of year, partly because a lot of people are drawn to MarketingKind, as they have been more broadly to Pimp My Cause, at moments of transition. Maybe they're looking to move from a leadership role to a portfolio career, or to segue into a new sector, or to find a way to get into a line of activity that is more meaningful to them in some way, or simply to find new inspiration for themselves, their teams, their organizations. Now, I can't imagine anyone better to have a conversation about renewal with than Lynne Franks, other than perhaps having a conversation with Lynne in the context of this wonderful group of people that can amplify Lynne's insights. Every time I have a conversation with Lynne, I always feel afterwards that the space of what is possible has somehow magically become much bigger during that conversation. So I really wanted to share that experience and amplify that experience across the group. The last time that I saw Lynne in person, as opposed to on a Zoom, was at the celebration of her OBE, which she received partly for services to fashion, partly for services to business, but also partly for services to women. And I think was a trendsetter in that I don't think anybody had received an OBE for services to women previously, but I believe that other people have done since. Lynne, of course, first came to prominence running Franks PR, which became an iconic fashion PR agency. She instigated London Fashion Week, the London Fashion Awards. I think it's fair to say that for a long time, if it was happening in fashion, Lynne was behind it. And if Lynne wasn't behind it, maybe it wasn't happening in fashion. But not only did she renew London as a global capital of fashion culture, but she also renewed herself as a champion of sustainable living, of women's empowerment, of social enterprise. She launched the first ever women's only radio station. She pulled together mass participation events and concerts such as What Women Want on the South Bank. She was a key part of the Billion Rising movement, which has campaigned to protect women from the fear of violence. And also worked with the fashion industry on ethical initiatives such as the creation of Fashion Aid and Fashion Cares. And I think that during that time, Lynne has been known, perhaps above all, for a couple of things. Firstly, for huge reserves of inner resilience that may be associated with being a practicing Buddhist, and also a tremendous, uncanny eye for the zeitgeist of major change and how you can work with emerging trends to make magic happen. So thank you so much, Lynne, for joining us and for making our first digital fireside possible.
Pleasure.
On this theme of renewal, when you think back over such a sort of diverse range of achievements that would appear on the surface to have come full circle from almost promoting consumerism to promoting anti-consumerism and sustainable living. But when you reflect on the variety of adventures that you've been on, what do you see as the key moments of renewal for you, and what was key to making them successful?
Well, you mentioned briefly that I'd been following Buddhism for a number of years, and for me, it was when I kind of burnt out, I suppose, and was looking for something to sustain me. I was so busy day and night. I had 2 small children. I was running this very active PR company, as you said. And I had a number of friends in the fashion business in New York who were also practicing this Buddhism, and they introduced it to me. And then I came back and I met more people that practiced it. There was quite a hub of fashion people. Jeff Banks was practicing it. He introduced me to Sandy Shaw. I mean, it sounds like they were all celebrities. It certainly wasn't. It was kind of very much, you know, people from every area of life. And I started chanting, and that really, not only did that give me a kind of a practice that I kept to morning and night that allowed me to ground myself, but it was also a way to kind of manifest and change my belief system to a degree. I started realizing about, I mean, this was a long time ago. I mean, I had been practicing Buddhism for many, many years, like over 30, possibly even nearly 40 years. So it made me realize that that I was responsible for my actions, that there is an effect if you create the cause. I mean, it's just common sense, really. It doesn't have to be a spiritual practice. That if I created something, then I will get it back in one way or another. And without going too deep into the philosophy of it, it made me appreciate that there were many ways of creating change. And I wanted to be a part of that change, because we, even 30 years ago, it was very clear, having grown up in the 60s and starting my business in the early 70s, that we were living in a world that was not sustainable and complete and sufficient for many people. So as much as I was working in, you say, consumerism, I was one of Thatcher's children in many ways. I wasn't conservative, but I was certainly in that world and getting the benefits of it. At the same time, I saw how much we could do to create change and support others through our work. And I also was part of an organization, still going, a network actually, it's not an organization, called Social Venture Network, which started in America with Ben and Jerry and Whole Food, and very much the Roddicks were involved right from the beginning, even if it was in the States. And I got involved with that, with Joe Fairley and Craig Sams and Anita and Gordon, and, you know, the people that were kind of like the hippie entrepreneurs who had sort of ended up starting businesses, which grew, of course, colossally. And they always had the belief that we could make a difference through our business. And I was very much part of that group. So I remember going to do talks to marketing groups, actually, across the UK and in Ireland. That was a particularly funny one, talking about socially responsible business. We didn't even talk about CSR. We didn't talk about green business, triple bottom line. I mean, none of that. We're talking a long time ago. And so it was something I could see that as marketeers and communications people, we could really create a difference through our work. And so that came, I guess, from my spiritual work, my spiritual practice, my spiritual beliefs, understanding that we don't have to just be selling. We could also be creating something, talking of renewal, something that is about renewal in society as well, because we have the skills. We know, when you talk about the influencers now, if you've got quite a lot of people following you on Instagram, you're an influencers, but we know that the true influence have always been the marketeers, really. And it's about using that power and knowledge and experience for good, which is why you're all here, and why, Paul, you've been so successful creating this this group, which I feel wonderful. But the Irish story is that I went to speak at the Irish Marketing Society. I don't know if any of you are Irish and ever members of it, but they thought I've got to talk about it. I said to Paul, do not mention Ab Fab. I did say do not. I have to mention it because it's so much part of my story. But anyway, I went to speak there, and it was an evening event, and I walked in before it started, and I could see on each table, and I love the Irish, by the way, but I could see on each table, bottle of gin, bottle of whiskey, bottle of whatever, vodka. I mean, it was a lot of alcohol on each table. And they thought I was the character from Absolutely Fabulous. They played the theme song. They wanted me to go up onto the little rostrum and make jokes and be the character and be falling all over the place. I was the only person there not drinking, actually. So there I was sort of talking about, you know, CSR and making a difference, and as marketeers, sort of stuff I've just been saying and sharing. And they looked at me as if I was absolutely round the twist. And that was it, really. And then afterwards, one guy came up to me who was marketing man for a big insurance company. And he'd really heard me, and he said, I'd really like to start lots of initiatives. He was talking about for women, and this, bearing in mind this was a long time ago and it was Ireland, you know, where we can support women and get them talking, and we'll put the money into it. So it didn't matter, you know, like, there was one person that heard me, that's fine, and it was funny. And then I had to go on, what's the big show in Ireland, the Today, the Gay Burn, anyway, and they'd already heard about it. It became the talk of Dublin actually for a while. I had to go and talk about the fact that they thought I was a character, and then I came up and was telling them about being responsible marketeers. That was one of my stories. We can talk about AdFab. I mean, I could actually, talking of renewal, I mean, I don't think anybody could have had an experience that I had. It was unique, that as I am changing myself, as I'm following a spiritual path, as I am coming off that particular journey and selling my business and coming out of that and wanting to do things which I felt were more responsible, there is a parody of me on television every week that everybody knows is supposed to be me. And, you know, I remember going to a party that Vogue magazine did at San Lorenzo. It's not my usual scene, but anyway, I was there, and it came on in the bar. They had the TV on, and it was on. It was like the third episode in. Everybody came to the bar, all watching it. The whole fashion industry. I'm standing there, and they're all looking at me, looking at TV, looking at me, looking at TV. I am not that character. I don't drink very much, and certainly nothing at the moment. And but there are aspects. When I look back, there are so many aspects that were funnier, and even crazier than those days. So I guess that was a big one for me. I'm going through my renewal, and here is a parody of me on TV every week, which the media are calling, you know, me as the person that inspired it, so called. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah.
And then the next renewals, when I went to live in LA, sold the business was a big one, and then I went to live in LA. Started another PR business.
And so, of course, you know, when we talk about renewal isn't the same as starting again from scratch, because you carry so much with you, and you were already developing these skills as a marketer, as somebody who could see the future, as somebody who could make seemingly impossible things happen, as somebody who was willing to do that. So, what would you say were the things that stayed the same during that period? I mean, it sounds like your spiritual side sort of burgeoned, so it wasn't static, but it was continuous in the sense that it grew in a consistent way. But what were the things that stayed the same, and what were the things that changed? We have a gathering coming up in a few weeks with Seth Godin, and something I've heard him say is that, well, I've heard him talk about the world of fashion and the world of charity in one way which is similar, in that he suggests that there are a sector and an industry that are both governed by affiliation. And you've talked about your influence, the people that you've been able to bring together, and so on. So what would you say are the sort of parallels that have stayed with you through your varied career, and what are the things that you've really had to leave behind?
Well, the passion for what I do has always been there. Whatever it may be today, that's where my passion is. So having that energy created by the passion, very much part of it. I love bringing people together. I was on the first Women's Network board when it started, I don't know how many years ago. And so I've also seen over the years very clearly, I'm sorry to go into my women stuff, but it's very clear that women do generally, not here, but generally kind of want and need a space where they can talk and open up with other women. So bringing women together and bringing leadership, women in leadership together has always been something I've wanted, that I do a lot of. And that doesn't mean to say that men don't need their own space either, I may say. But it's just the way we connect and communicate and open up. So I started, for example, women's leadership networks at McDonald's in the UK, which they then took all over Europe. And that was something very different because it was a very male-led business, and the women had to, or felt they had to behave in a very masculine way, sitting in the bar, you know, laughing at dirty jokes at 2 in the morning when they were on away trips, because otherwise they wouldn't be taken seriously. Of course, it's a long time ago, by the men in their businesses, in the business, that was specifically McDonald's, but they were very typical of a lot of other businesses, still are. So I think my passion for women moving into their leadership roles has been with me a long time, in the leadership roles that they can take, and also bringing together men and women as leaders, really acknowledging each other's gifts and also respecting each other's differences, I think, has been really important for me. I don't know whether that answers the question, but anyway, so there's always, the activities I do, there's always something very much behind it, which is based on my values, and my values have stayed the same, and I should have said that from the beginning. Yeah.
So I guess there's a couple of things. I'd love to hear more specifically in terms of your work supporting women in their own processes of renewal, and often their own process of renewal in creating their own businesses, their own social enterprises. And I'd like to hear about your adventure in Seed.
The way that women get support is from each other. They kind of really grow within groups, circles, pods, if you like, which is what I run, of small groups where they can actually really support each other. So that's something that I've been working on for a long time, and it's really, this shutdown, this great pause, has given me the opportunity to develop Seed, which is, apart from a book, it's a huge body of content that has been delivered everywhere, from African villages to post-war zones to women's prisons, Prince's Trust, you know, all over the world, and has just got published before COVID. It got published in Kazakhstan, of places. I was invited there for a conference, Empowering Women conference. And it's just come out in Russian, and has also come out in Pashto, which is a Afghani language, because the the woman leader, political leader in Kazakhstan, of all places, wants to use Seed as a leadership program for women young women in Afghanistan, because they are working very closely. On top of that, I'm also in conversation with a number of women leaders in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, for example. And other women friends who I've got living in various places in Jordan and Syria, about Seed going there and becoming a toolkit and a network for women over there, because they've got some very, very successful women entrepreneurs over there in Saudi as much as anywhere else, but places like Egypt, Jordan, Morocco. And then for me, my passion has been, so how do we help the women refugees create their own small sustainable businesses? That could be anything, but mostly it's crafts, and the rural women as well in Iraq who really, you know, they're feeding the babies. They need to have something that's going to bring the money in. So, or not just money, I mean, currency, food, anything. So what I want to do is, and I've got all my meetings next week, is to work with the Middle East. If anybody's working, if everybody would like to help me, how can we bring communities together, so the people that have, and I just think it's not like, here's a charity, I'm going to put some money in. It's exactly what you do with Pimp My Cause. It's how do we create a scenario, create an opportunity where those who have can do well and support each other, and thereby get that trickle down, so we can cascade down, so we can actually be supporting people that really need the help. At the beginning, you said you do these things and you just go into doing these big things. One could say, with a lot of naivety and rashness, one could say, and sometimes I somehow make them happen. I don't know how, honestly, I don't. I mean, I can't show you, because I've got a huge poster on the wall there which says what women want. When I had no money, left the PR company, took over South Bank, got it for free, and got Anita Roddick to support me with Body Shop. That's why I've got this huge poster, a global celebration of womanhood. 95, the whole of South Bank got taken over just prior to the women's conference in Beijing. I don't know if anybody remembers it, the UN did. And I had a big concert with Sinead O'Connor and Chrissy Hind and others. And we had workshops and seminars showing women how to use the internet. Can you believe it? In 95, doesn't seem so long ago. We had a huge queue around the block, women learning how to use the internet. We had natural health. We had nuns. We had sexuality workshops. We had a big story in the Evening Standard, sex, nuns and rock and roll at Lynne's Women's Festival. And it was absolutely amazing. And of course, everyone wanted to happen every year. And in my usual way, it was like, well, that was great, but now I'm doing something else. And that became WOW eventually, which is a hugely successful event that's done at the South Bank. Nothing, I mean, I was on the original committee, but it was a precursor. I mean, I'm very good at sort of starting these things off, and I'm full of ideas, but I love passing them on to others too, you know, because I'm on the next, really.
It's wonderful to hear. You know, again, I think people will recognize the comments that I made at the start, that you always have an eye to the future, because that's really, whenever I talk to you, the natural place is you're always talking about the future. And it's great to hear that you have plans for your own ongoing renewal, that you have plans for the ongoing renewal of your locality, and also the rest of the world in the process.
Yeah, that's it. And of course, I think we ought to remember now, which is really strange for me to say, because being a futurist is part of what I do, is that the future is here now. And, you know, it's not about what's going to happen. Well, yes, we're always looking 10 years, 20 years, but this is all the things that I predicted, that I've written about for 20 years. It is now. And this is the time with the door open for us to create change, all of us together, because we can't do it alone. I can't. I couldn't even begin to. So, you know, it's like, that's why these groups such as yourself, but anyway, that's so important that we can work together, because this is the moment now. And I was thinking about it today, particularly in view of the fact we were going to be speaking about this subject of renewal. And we can all say, okay, we're having renewal because there's been COVID and it's changed things. These changes were happening before COVID. It's just that COVID has given us the opportunity to see how change can happen so fast. So I can't find it. There's this Buckminster Fuller. I'm sure you all know Buckminster Fuller, visionary, architect, engineer, who made an amazing quote that I do quote all the time about the future, actually, and the present, mostly about the present now. And I think it's very relevant this week. We've seen what's going on in the United States, the inauguration, and how much anger there still is there, and the guns, and just very frightening. And I think that I do not want to go back to what they call the normal. I don't even want the new normal, the way they're picking it up. I want something completely different. And Buckminster Fuller quote said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." So that's my kind of big picture, whether it's local, global, is those of us who wish to be involved in creating this new future for our children, in my case, my grandchildren, do it by creating a new model that is not going to war with the existing model. You're just doing these things in community, creating sustainable projects and so on, that people will just gravitate to. We don't have to go and stand outside Westminster and protest. Not that I've got anything against that either, but it's like we create a new reality that makes the old model obsolete. And that's where I think we're at right now.
The observation, if I understood it correctly, that first of all, that maybe the biggest obstacle to change is often our own fear.
Yes.
And the biggest opportunities for change come less from changing what is and more from starting what's new.
In a way, that's what I was saying to Joel, really. It was really trusting the flow. It's all perfect, and it doesn't have to be structured in this linear way. I mean, I haven't talked about my whole belief about everything in much more of a circular way, in terms of management, in terms of systems, in terms of the economy. I think we need to go from a linear world to a circular world, and it's not a gender-based. It has more feminine, soft skills approach, but it is certainly not gender. So it's a different way forward, where we can flow in those circles and work with each other in circles, as much as, in the same way that Paul and Anna encourage here, and Paul writes about, is like, let's work. It's getting rid of that whole old-fashioned hierarchical, corporate, governmental way of doing things, and coming from that that flow.
Just a couple of things have really resonated with me that from what you've said, from what I've been thinking about recently. First of all, I think of you, Lynne, as very purposeful, but I've been coming increasingly to thinking less about purpose as plan and more about purpose as a disposition that helps you make the most of emergent opportunity. And I think
beautiful.
And the other thought that occurs to me is just when you talk about, getting out of linear approaches and maximization, they're not very, human beings are not maximizers. If our senses, for example, if you smell a bad smell, if that bad smell is made twice as strong, you don't actually smell it twice as much. Most of our senses work in a way of what is helpful to us rather than in a linear maximization sense. And I think that applies, with food. You don't want to maximize food, you want to optimize food, and so on. So I think it's a lot to do with sort of rehumanizing the economy rather than economizing humans.
Well, I'm in a little town called Wincanton in Somerset, And when people ask me how I got here, I'd never heard of Wincanton, not even the races. And I do usually say I flew in on my broomstick because I kind of feel that is the way. There's a lot of witchy vibes here. And I had no intention of living in Somerset, but it turns out that's exactly where I'm supposed to be. I love it here. I've got lots of friends in all the other towns, which is so many interesting um, initiatives going on in places like Frome and Glastonbury, of course, and Bruton. It's a very interesting place to live. And I was renting, and then I found this very old house, sort of 15th century house in the middle of town that was falling to pieces. And in a moment of madness, I bought it. And that has a little shop at the front, and then I live at the back. And then I realized that there was a rather noisy pub next door that was going very cheap. So without thinking it through at all, I bought that. And then I converted that as also quite a few hundred years old. And I got rid of all the ghosts, and I turned it into a really beautiful cafe, as you say, retreat center. There's bedrooms here, there's workshop rooms and treatment rooms, and I got it all ready, and we started, and we had some wonderful events and retreats, and then, like everybody else, COVID came. But I love it here, and it's beautiful. So I hope I'll welcome all of you, men and women, here when we're open again. It's very nice. It's a great place to be, just off the 303. The sort of lack of self-belief will be there until you put the I out of the equation. If you believe in what you're doing, which I do, totally, whatever it is at the time I mentioned earlier, that becomes bigger than the I, bigger than the ego, bigger than the lack of self-confidence. I mean, the first time I stood up and talked to a big crowd, I was honestly shitting myself, and I had to run to the loo and do a little prayer, and then come out and do it. And I learned on the job, like everything. I mean, I left school at 16, and I've really learned on the job as I've gone on. And it's because I truly believe in what's going on, or what I'm doing, or what I believe in. So instead of, the self-belief will come when you, in the doing of believing in what you're doing, if you know what I mean. It's like, take you out of it, take yourself out, because a lot of us have got the imposter syndrome. I mean, I if I have to walk into a room where I don't know anybody, I just get absolutely full of shyness and can't go up. I'm not the sort of person that walks into a room of strangers, just find interesting about Zoom, and goes up and starts chatting to people. I get very shy in certain situations. That everybody does. So it's just like, but if I'm in that room and I'm there because I know I want to share something really important that I believe in, then I will make that move because it's bigger than me. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? So, believe in yourself for sure. Of course, believe in yourself, but also be aware of what you have achieved and who you are and what your values are. Just check in on those values. Live according to your values. An awful lot of people don't, or don't get the opportunity to. So just, you're great. Just know that you're great. And but just, as I say, move the ego to the side. We're moving. If we want to now, we've got the opportunity to move into a heart-led situation, whether it's work, personal life. We've got that choice now. It may sound a bit ironic with millions of people being made redundant and the economy in a very fragile state, but we have got that choice. So follow your heart, and it might be something completely different than you might even think you want to do. It could be getting hold of a little bit of land and starting going back to the land and growing veggies. It could be anything, but it's just like, follow your heart. That's my, I didn't say that before, but I think that's the biggest thing for me. And I follow my heart. That's how I've ended up here with in this old building, which has got leaks that I'm trying to get fixed and all kinds of things, but I love it. It's gorgeous, and I'm following my heart. So
that's a wonderful note to at least formally conclude on. We always try, and people have a lot of things booked for straight afterwards, but we will leave the meeting open. So if anybody wants to stay longer, that's absolutely welcome. Lynne, I said that every conversation with you makes me feel that more is possible than it was before, and today that was definitely the case. And I'm really glad that one of the things that may be possible is holding a MarketingKind retreat in Wincanton at some point.
I'm thrilled about that. And I will be back as well. I will be back here because I'm a member now. So thank you very much for having me.